Forget about Godzilla versus Kong. How would either of them fare against the biblical beast, the leviathan, of Job 41? I'm Josh Larson. That's the sort of burning philosophical question we like to ask here at the Think Christian podcast, where we believe there's no such thing as secular. Godzilla, Kong, they're the titans of the box office right now, and also the perfect excuse to have on Sarah Welch Larson to discuss her new book, Becoming Alien. In Becoming Alien, she discusses ideas of evil, chaos, discreation, as they apply to another set of movie monsters, those icky, drippy xenomorphs from the Alien series. Sarah and I are going to discuss the book and talk about how some of the ideas there also relate to the new Godzilla vs. Kong. It's a monster mash plus theology, coming right up. Sarah Welch Larson is here, part of her virtual book tour. Congratulations on the book, Sarah, on Becoming Alien. I have read it. This is going to be, I'm sure you've had some conversations, maybe not, but with people who haven't read the book but want to talk about it. But I have read it, really enjoyed it, so I can't wait to dig in. You have been making the rounds promoting it. Are you sick of talking about the Alien movies yet?
It's probably a good thing that I'm never going to get sick of talking about Alien. So yes, thank you. Yeah, it was a fun book to write, and it's been a fun book to talk about. So I'm excited to talk about it some more.
I imagine if you're going to write a book about something, you have a high tolerance for that subject. So we are going to touch on the Alien franchise, but I also wanted to consider some of the ideas in the book alongside Godzilla vs. Kong, the new movie. I think there's some natural connections there that we can get into. But first, for those who are just now hearing about Becoming Alien, even if they've heard you on this podcast before a number of times, if they haven't heard about the book, maybe give me the basic idea that you are exploring there.
The elevator pitch is this is a feminist theological exploration of all 6 Alien movies, specifically looking at the ideas from Dr. Catherine Keller's book, Face of the Deep, A Theology of Becoming. And I know that taking a theology of becoming and the Alien movies is probably not the most intuitive thing. But when you look at the Alien movies through Dr. Keller's work, and then when you read Dr. Keller's work with the Alien movies in mind, both of them just sort of snap into place in a way that felt really natural to me. And fortunately, a few people took me seriously enough to publish a book about it.
Yeah, I think it is a natural fit. Your book was a great excuse to read Keller's first and become familiar with her work. I wasn't before. She's a great writer, just the way she uses imagery and metaphor, even though she's tackling these hugely dense ideas. I mean, I'll admit some of the stuff was beyond me. I couldn't quite follow her everywhere, but I was fascinated by the ideas she had and the way she explored them. And it mapped really nicely. You did a great job mapping it nicely onto the Alien films. So yeah, there's a second book we can recommend as well. That's Face of the Deep, Catherine Keller. Now, in your book, you do give some time to the Leviathan, the sea beast of Job 41. And here's where the Godzilla connection, I think, comes into play. What I want to do, I think this will become clear if I read some of the descriptions of Leviathan in that passage. So I'm going to read some of that here. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares open the doors of its mouth ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth, sparks of fire shoot out, smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. So that's a pretty good casting call for Godzilla, I'd say. Now, when I've thought about Leviathan and read those descriptions, I've kind of seen it as meant to emphasize our puniness as humans before God, before his creation, because this description comes as part of God's response to Job's complaint, kind of putting him in his place where God is revealing and demonstrating his awesome power. But in
Brace yourself
alien,
like a man. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I love that line. Yeah.
In Becoming Alien, you kind of talk about a different vantage point, though, Sarah. You do cite this reading, Keller's reading largely, of Leviathan as a beast that, yes, is fearsome, but also like a playmate of sort with God. And then you make the
Hmm.
connection from there to Alien Resurrection, the fourth Alien film. So can you tease that out a little bit for us, how those ideas are connected and what you were going for?
Absolutely, yeah. So Dr. Keller's book is a refiguring mostly of just the first two verses of Genesis, just a reframing of that passage. And she talks about creation as being something that God is continually bringing into being, hence the title of the book, A Theology of Becoming. And she also talks about this idea of the story of Job not as being a tragedy, but as a comic retelling of the story of Genesis, where the Leviathan is a fearsome creature, but it is also God's playmate, and it is a source of delight and wonder. And then that ends up tying into the alien in some interesting ways once you hit some of the later movies that get a little bit more into farce. So that also felt like a little bit of a natural fit. And it also made me understand, in particular, Alien Resurrection, which is a movie that I do not love, but that I am continually compelled by. And that one especially deals with the alien not just as a scary monster, but also as something to be kind of delighted by in some very strange ways.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably, I don't know, is it fair to say it's the weirdest Alien film? I mean, they all have their
Oh, hands down.
peculiarities, but it's, yeah,
Yeah.
this one really kind of goes out there and in some interesting ways that you kind of helped reframe for me to see the comic potential
Mhm.
there, which I think kind of ties back to what you're saying about Job. Now, I don't know if you came across this, Sarah, but in 2014, this was when the first of the recent Godzilla and Kong films came out. Elijah Davidson
Mhm.
wrote a blog post where he compared the verses from Job 41 to images, to actual frames from the original 1954 Godzilla. Now, Elijah worked
Mhm.
with you on the book, right?
He did. He was my editor.
Okay, yeah, with real
Mhm.
spirituality. So I don't know if
Yes.
you remember that, but it was a great idea he had. And it kind of like visually showed how the passages that I read were so reflected in how Godzilla was imagined. And I
Mhm.
just wonder, when you think of Godzilla, we'll get to Godzilla versus Kong, but when you think of Godzilla as this sort of legendary figure, what sort of comparisons come to mind for you between this Leviathan figure, having spent so much time thinking about that and writing about that in relation to the Alien films? What sort of the connection you see there between Godzilla and this biblical beast, the Leviathan?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned in one of the verses in Job talks about how limber the Leviathan is. And I actually like had a note when I was watching this most recent one, like for a giant dinosaur, Godzilla's a pretty limber monster. Yeah, it's a very natural fit, although I had never really made the playful connection before. I tend to think of
Mm,
Godzilla as being like a more mournful figure, especially from the
yes.
original movies where Godzilla is very much a stand in for the bomb. But at the same time, like there is this level of, I don't know, you have to be playful and creative on some level in order to be able to draw that as a metaphor, I think. And so if you take
Mhm.
that out to its extremes, then you can have a lot of fun with that story, even while taking those things seriously.
Yeah. I think that's one of it's why these two figures, both King Kong and Godzilla, are so last in our imagination because you can map so much onto them. Maybe
Mhm.
more so with Kong because there are some negative metaphors you can map onto him, especially when you look at the original film. But it's kind of like this open book you can write in. And Godzilla, I think, too, as you said, primarily in the 54 film, is meant to represent a creature born of atomic testing and meant to harken back to the horrors of the bomb being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Again, coming out in 54, this is something the people of Japan had freshly endured. And so there is kind of a central metaphor tied to Godzilla. But even watching it again, it struck me this is the 54 film, when he first appears at this village, before we see Godzilla, it's almost like a tsunami had hit the village and also works kind of as a metaphor for just nature itself, the awesome fearsomeness of nature that mankind cannot control, especially people living in an island nation have to endure this regularly. And that, of course, ties back to Job as well, when, we have this mighty wind being a force that represents God's awesomeness too. So a lot of things coming full circle here between Godzilla, Kong, and Job. We do want to get to the new movie, Godzilla versus Kong. So when we come back, we'll discuss how it looks more specifically alongside the monsters of Job 41. We'll be right back.
Hello, John J. Thompson here, and if you know me at all, you must know how much fun I had pulling together this episode's correspondingly themed batch of songs touching on the idea of biblical monsters, from gypsy folk to heavy metal, dark Americana, rap, rock, and even some strange pop. These creepy monsters have been lurking in the oceans, caves, crevices, and shadows of our collective imaginations since time immemorial, and thus have made it into our musical vocabulary with great frequency, and in many cases considerable drama. Leviathans, serpents, behemoth, giants, dragons, Goliath, Nephilim, they're all represented here alongside their boss, the big man, the beast himself. Just search for the Think Christian playlist on Spotify and it should pop right up. And if you can think of any great biblical beast songs I missed, tweet at me at John J. Thompson and I will consider adding them to the zoo. That's it for now. It's back out into the darkness for me. Until next time, this is JJT signing off. Wish me luck out there.
Welcome back to the TC Podcast. I'm Josh Larson here with Sarah Welch Larson, a regular member of the podcast team, but now also the author of Becoming Alien. Let's get to Godzilla vs. Kong. Sarah, the fourth film in this recent run of MonsterVerse movies, the series is being called. Two of these have featured Godzilla, and there's been one previous Kong movie. Here they're brought together as the box office gods demanded. You knew it was going to come to this point. What is your history with these movie monsters, Sarah? Does it go all the way back to the original films, King Kong in 33, Godzilla in 54? And how many of these recent ones have you seen?
I need to catch up on so many of these. I actually don't think I've seen any other Godzilla movies before this one, which is a thing to fess up to, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen Kong Skull Island, had a blast in Kong Skull Island, probably because I didn't know that I needed to see Tom Hiddleston wearing a gas mask swinging a katana until I saw it happen. Yeah, I sort of came to this one a little bit fresh, but while I was watching the movie, all I could think of is, are you familiar with Calvin and Hobbes?
Oh, yeah. I had the
strip?
collections as a kid and just devoured them.
So the only thing that I was thinking of while I was watching this movie was there was a very specific strip where Calvin has these tyrannosaurs and F-14s, and he is saying like, this is so cool. And Hobbes at the same time is saying, this is so stupid. And like, I had that exact reaction, both of those reactions at the same time while I was watching this. Had a lot of fun with it. It was kind of nice to come to something fresh and to just enjoy like a really big, dumb movie that looked really fun and was definitely very cool and also kind of dumb.
Yeah, there are some roll your eyes moments. Absolutely. I'm going to say most of them belong to the scenes with the humans, though, for me, than the scenes with the monsters. So, which you kind of know that's likely going to be the weak part. That's part of the grand tradition of these movies. I have a little bit more of a history. I'm a huge fan of both of those originals. I just think right now King Kong is like one of my top 20 films of all time, just because it's so foundational as a myth and groundbreaking in terms of the filmmaking, the special effects. And Godzilla, the 54, is so potent too in the ways we were discussing previously. And so I think those are just absolute classics. I saw a ton of the other Godzillas, the more uneven ones, shall we say, as a kid when they'd pass by on TV. I don't know if I probably like watched the monster fights and then I just moved on when it broke away from that. But yeah, this most recent group, I'm a little bit like you, missed Skull Island, so you're ahead of me there. Heard good things about it. I did see the 2014 Godzilla, which I thought was quite good in terms of what it did with scale and capturing the immensity of what it would actually be like to encounter a creature like this. So I'll need to catch up with those other ones. But this one, yeah, I think we're about on the same page. I'm glad I saw it. And I do think that the director here, Adam Wingard, working with an extensive special effects team, I think what I liked about it is that they really gave Kong in particular a personality. And a lot of this is done in the animation work. You know, you can see little things like there was in one of their first encounters, at one point, Kong just leans back and gives Godzilla a headbutt. And just, to include that says so much kind of about Kong's personality. Later on, we get his shoulder has been separated and he decides to do, the tough guy move of setting it back into place by slamming it against something. And he chooses to slam it against a skyscraper. So that's kind of one of those like great but dumb moments.
I love
too,
that
I
moment.
think you're talking about. Yeah. And then, more seriously, there's a through line of Kong wanting to get back to his home. The movie opens with him imprisoned in this sphere, this containment sphere that's meant to mimic Skull Island. But of course, he knows it's just a cage. And so to me, this felt almost more like Kong's movie than Godzilla's movie. Did you have that impression?
I definitely did. I kind of wish that there had been a little bit more Godzilla. I really appreciated the moments where it just cuts over to Godzilla and you can kind of see the look on his face and you can tell that he's just over what everybody else is doing. This very much felt like Kong's movie, and I appreciated the ways that they kind of updated it to be a little bit more of a personal story. Like, I'm really glad that they got rid of the whole Kong kidnaps a blonde screaming lady trope that seems to be very prevalent in a lot of previous King Kong movies. And I really liked the bond that he has with like the people who are trying to communicate with him. I was much more invested in the movie when either Kong or Godzilla were on screen, and then everything else just kind of felt like scene setting so that you could get one or both of them on the screen at other points in the movie.
Yeah, there was a lot of setting up, maybe more plotting than was necessary, I would say, for sure. Well, let's spend a little more time on Godzilla just because there's more of a connection there, I think, with your book. And this is in this movie at least, a very ambivalent depiction of Godzilla, because even though previously Godzilla's sided with humanity, this movie opens with an attack from Godzilla on Florida that, for reasons that aren't at first revealed. So it kind of goes back to that reading of Job 41, where Leviathan is both awesome and playful. I'm curious what you made of Godzilla in this film. Did you see any sort of similar ambivalence there?
Oh, yeah. It almost felt like he was being presented as a force of nature, which is also very much in keeping with the Leviathan, too. Just kind of attacking without warning, doesn't really seem to care about the people that he's around, and doesn't really have any like personal connection with anybody who is on the ground, just is a force of nature and does his thing because that's just what Godzilla does. And all you have to do is either get out of the way or you're doomed. It felt a little bit more playful, I think, when Kong showed up, but it didn't really seem like Godzilla was necessarily, I don't want to say stooping to that level, but it felt like Godzilla wasn't necessarily on board with being quite so playful in this version. He was over it very much.
I love that reading of it because it didn't strike me at the time, but now after you said that, looking back, I can see that expression on Godzilla's face. And it kind of plays out, without spoiling anything, it kind of plays out in how the fights go a little bit as well. So yeah, maybe there's a little more personality there to Godzilla than I'm giving the movie credit for. Did any other connections to your book occur to you as you were watching this? Because I tried to just get lost in the movie, and mostly I did, but I was also in the back of my mind like, oh, I wonder what Sarah thinks about this, or I wonder if this is ringing any bells for her. Was there anything else you'd want to touch on before we go?
Since I wrote this book, I keep thinking of evil in terms of the way that Dr. Keller puts it, which is evil as being like the exploitation of others and a denial of their relationship. And so there's a little bit of that going on at the very beginning because Kong is literally cut off from his family and any ties that he has and from his home, other than the scientist who is trying to communicate with him and then her adoptive daughter. And then there's also this idea of this corporation who might be a little bit on the seedier side that is also trying to exploit other things for their own profits. And that also very much ties in with the models of evil that Dr. Keller is working with and that show up in the Alien movies as well. So a little bit more abstract, I think. It's not as though Kong and Godzilla necessarily are fighting each other is a model of evil. Like, that's just two boxers going at it in the ring, I think. It's more an idea of exploitation being this model of evil, which is going on in this movie, but it's a little bit more in the background and it's more the plot that is setting up the rumble between these two monsters.
Yeah, and in that respect, the Kong and Godzilla are very much like the xenomorphs of the Alien series, where they're independent of what is actually the root evil in some ways that you're discussing, which is the exploitation. And I think that's a theme you can find in both of those original films. It's clear in the original King Kong that this movie director, Carl Denham, who comes to the island in search of Kong to make this movie and ends up capturing him and bringing him back to New York City, that there's a clear exploitation of nature going on there. I mean, there are colonialist themes you could read into that, all sorts of things. And then in Godzilla, it's a little different. As we said, the bomb is the main metaphor, but there's even this idea of the exploitation of science, because the way they stop Godzilla in that 54 film is a scientist develops what he calls the oxygen destroyer. It's a bomb that goes underwater, suffocates Godzilla. He doesn't want to use it because he's afraid of what other scientists will do with it and will create another weapon and more destruction. So there's exploitation of science in that film too. So yeah, exploitation as an expression of evil is something that definitely connects this movie, Godzilla versus Kong, the originals, and the Alien films as well. All right, let's wrap up with the most important question, Sarah. Based on your somewhat limited experience, would you say you're going to have to be Team Godzilla or Team Kong?
Team Godzilla all the way.
And that's just because it ties more neatly in with your book, I suppose?
That's part of it, yes. But I also like Godzilla as a little bit more of a metaphor. And I know that Kong has those metaphors going for him as well. But I very much like science fiction as metaphor for whatever issues that you want to explore. And for me, I appreciate kind of the pathos that comes along with Godzilla and the slightly more serious nature of that particular monster. So that, and you really can't say no to a dinosaur that shoots like bright blue flames out of his mouth.
It struck me again watching this movie. That's just not fair that Godzilla has that sort of weapon that Kong doesn't. So I'm going to balance the scales and go with Kong just based on that. But you used the right word for Godzilla earlier, mournful. There's definitely more of a mournfulness to Godzilla, more of an anger to Kong, I would say, in how they're responding to basically the puny humans running around underneath their feet. Well, congrats again on the book. It's great. It's widely available, right? People can pretty much find it everywhere?
Wherever fine books are sold, yes.
Great. And if they want to keep up with you, follow any book-related happenings, I was able to be part of a fun alien watch party that we did. See what else you're up to. What's the best place for people to do that?
You can find me on the internet at dodgyboffin.com, but I'm mostly on Twitter under the handle dodgyboffin. That's DODGYBOFFIN, where I spend most of my time shouting about science fiction, including things like Godzilla and King Kong.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. We'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thanks, Josh.
That's it for all the monster talk on this show. If you want more Godzilla content, I did write about the 2014 Godzilla back when it came out on the TC website, thinkchristian.net. We're also going to have a new piece from J.R. Forasteros about Godzilla versus Kong. That'll be coming, might even be up there right now. Either way, if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our articles, be sure to subscribe to receive our emails. You can do that at thinkchristian.net/subscribe. And as always, you can always send us feedback. You can send us comments about the show, anything else, questions. Go ahead and email us at tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net. And of course, you can connect with us on Facebook and Twitter at thinkchristian. Now, for our YouTube viewers, you did miss out on samples from John J. Thompson's Spotify playlist that he compiled along the theme of biblical beasts just for this episode. You can find that whole playlist by searching for the Think Christian playlist on Spotify. The Think Christian podcast is a production of Reframe Ministries, a family of programs designed to help you see your whole life reframed by God's gospel story. Visit reframeministries.org for more info. Our audio engineer and post-production supervisor is John Reeder, and Reframe's co-director overseeing content strategy is Robin Bassel. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to consider how another aspect of our pop culture fandom connects with our faith.